Welcome to the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Dekker Team, and I'm Yetta Dekker.
And I'm Ken Dekker.
And we form part of the Dekker Team, and we're excited once again to be back with you, and we're back to a popular topic. Now, it's primarily from a seller's perspective. It's a question we get asked all the time, or many questions around what should I do, what shouldn't I do, what's the best time of year to sell, that kind of thing from a seller's perspective. And yet, if you're a potential buyer, you'll want to stay tuned as well, because it also impacts you, the information we're giving the sellers. Wouldn't you agree?
It would.
Yeah. So, the question that we get all the time is the spring market. Is that the best market to sell in? Is that the only time we should really think about selling? Is it the best time to buy? Talk to us about the spring market, Ken. Or the other markets, I guess.
Yeah. Well, interesting enough, we sell homes every month of the year. So is there a good time to sell? Yeah, when a buyer is in the mode to buy your house, that's the good time to sell.
Right.
So it's really about, are the buyers out there? And houses sell every month of the year. Yes, they're...
Every week, actually.
Well, every day.
Every day of the year. Yeah,
yes.
That's right.
But the market does slow down in some of the months. Typically, the winter months are slower than summer months or spring months. And the interesting thing is that the inventory also goes down. So there's fewer sales happening, but there's less competition.
Right, and there's less competition, so therefore that means you have really just as good probability of selling your home, or finding a home really, throughout the whole year.
Yes.
Maybe a potential upside to the spring market is if you are going to be the best home on the block. Then you have a larger probability of creating a multiple offer scenario.
In the spring, yeah.
In the spring, because you've got more buyers, so you may have more people vying for it.
But very competitively priced.
Exactly. You've got to be the best house, best location, best condition, best price, and then you could potentially create that. So that would be a potential upside if you're that specific property and you're willing to go all out on absolutely all aspects of getting your home on the market. Otherwise?
Some people even say, well, should I take it off for the winter and put it back on in the spring? And I usually say, if you want to sell, you got to be on the market. You've got to be priced competitively. Your home has to show well, and you got to be available for showings. If your home's not available for a buyer that's coming into town or is moving for whatever reason, they need to downsize, they need to upsize, they need to right size. Whatever the reason is, if you're not available at the time they're buying, then you miss that buyer.
Right. And we don't want to miss a buyer, do we? Because that, if we're on the market, that's hopefully the intent. The days of just testing the market are really not something I would recommend in our current shifting market. We still have neighborhoods that are exclusively seller markets, and we have other markets that are buyer markets, and we have some markets that are balanced market. It's specific to your neighborhood and even specific to your house. It's such a hyper local conversation.
Yeah, and it really requires you to get in contact with us to look at your home, do the comparison, and find the relative homes that we would like to compare to. Now, we're not going to find the exact home because no home is the same as another one.
Right.
So we have to make some adjustments and some variations, and that's where the experience of being in the business for 25 and 20 years really makes the difference in knowing what the market's doing, specifically in a local area. Right,
and even the other team members that we have, which is our son Ryan and our daughter Candace, the other realtors on the team, they now have at least a half a dozen years of experience themselves, and really, as they say, they have 25 years experience, so they actually have more experience than Ken, they like to say.
Yeah, because they grew up with it.
Exactly. Mind you, even when you weren't in the industry, you were in the industry. He was out installing signs and doing our community newsletter and doing all those things that I needed help with. So really, there's tons, I guess almost 100 years worth of experience if you wrap it all together. That's just kind of crazy.
No, that's just weird.
Yeah, it certainly is. So everybody on the team utilizes the same processes, the same systems, the same strategies, and all of our learning has really come from our sellers and our buyers telling us what they're looking for, what's working, what's not working, and just testing the market all these years.
So let's get back to the spring market.
Yeah.
One of the things that is unknown when you're talking about waiting, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, whatever you're going to wait, is we don't know what the interest rates are going to do. And probably interest rates are one of the main factors that will affect pricing of homes, because it affects affordability so hugely. A 1 or 2% increase in interest rate affects the affordability very much, almost 10%.
Okay, can you explain that in explicit detail, what you mean by the affordability?
Yeah, affordability just means your mortgage payment, when the interest rate goes up 1 or 2%, with it being so low, makes a big difference in your payment, which now means you can afford less home for the same payment. So if you were able to pay $1,500 and you were able to buy, say, a $400,000 home for that payment, now with the interest rates up, that $1,500 payment, if the interest rate went up 2%, would affect you in around, you could probably only afford a house about $320,000. So the whole market gets downward pressure because people aren't able to afford as inexpensive as a home.
Right. And the person to talk to regarding your financing and specifically how much you can afford and you can't afford depending on the interest rates would be a mortgage specialist. Mm-hmm. And we certainly recommend you call More Than Enough, and we have all their contact information. Would encourage you. They're on the air actually right before we are from 9 to 9:30 at 99.1 or chri.ca.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that people say to me, well, maybe my house is going to be worth more in the spring. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. But the point is, if you're just selling and going into a rental or something, that's a valid...
Or leaving the area.
Or leaving the area. That may be a valid thing, although they may be higher in the other area in the spring as well. And if you're staying in the same marketplace, if your home has come down in price, so has the one you're buying. If your home's gone up, so has the one that you're buying, because you're in the same marketplace.
Right. Yeah, as a whole.
I
mean, you might leave one community and go to another community, and they've done different things. As we've talked about, some neighborhoods are still very much a seller's market, and other neighborhoods are very much a buyer's market, even leaning on depressed.
Yeah,
and others are truly balanced. Mm-hmm. Right?
So another question we get a lot is, what can I do to my home to increase its saleability and also usually to increase its sale price?
Right.
Two different things, saleability and sale price.
Right.
Now, it's interesting because some folks say, well, I don't want to do anything. I'm exhausted. I just can't take on another thing.
Or it just doesn't suit in my current state in life.
Yeah.
Right? Or I may be selling the home on behalf of someone else.
I need it up this week. I don't have time to do anything to it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Lots of reasons as to why you might not want to do a thing. And every home is saleable. You don't have to feel that you have to do anything. Now, whether you do or you don't do specific things will affect the price and will affect potentially days on market and will affect how it's received into the marketplace. So everything we do or everything we don't do does have an impact, and yet you don't have to ever feel pressured to do anything. Mm-hmm. As long as you understand the rest of the implications accordingly.
That happen to that. Another factor is whether your home is accessible. So if you've got pets that are preventing us from showing it, or you have specific times or days that we can't show it, all those things could affect the right buyer from seeing your home at the right moment.
Right, because some buyers will be more sold on your home before they come, and yet it may be the ideal house, except if they never saw it, maybe they found something else and they never came back to see yours if they couldn't get in the first time. So there is some real validity and accessibility.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that happened this last weekend. I have a client who wanted to see a few houses. We couldn't get in them for whatever reason. One wasn't convenient. One, the seller was out of country and forgot to tell their realtor. They went away for a week to Mexico and forgot to tell everybody, so they couldn't
get in.
No, so we couldn't get in on the weekend, and now we may or may not go back to that community, to those houses, and whereas
they think they found something.
Yeah, and they may have lost a sale.
Yeah. Absolutely. And a potential sale, because we
Potential,
don't know for sure that it would have been the house, but we now know for sure it won't be.
But that is something that the seller, you as a seller, can control.
Yeah.
It's one of the few things you can control. You can control the price, you can control the condition of the home, and you can control the availability of the home for showings.
Right. And the only thing I would say around price is you control what price you put it on the market at. You actually, as a seller, don't control what price the home will sell at.
Well, actually, I think you do.
I think you don't.
Well,
Because ultimately, if the buyer isn't willing to pay the price that you want, then you can't control the price.
But then who bought the house?
The seller.
The seller bought his own house back, right? It's like an auction. You put it out there. If a buyer comes and says, here, I want to buy your house at X, and you say, no, I'm not willing to sell that, I want to sell it at Y, you've effectively outbid that buyer to buy your own house.
True.
Yeah.
So if you want to perceive the seller as a buyer, I think that was a really trick way. You can see who the problem solver is in the pair. Anyhow, so typically the buyer is the one that's going to establish the max that somebody is going to pay for that property.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. That was great thinking, though.
Yes.
So now in terms of if I am going to do something to prepare my home for market and to increase the value, and this is the question we get so often, where do I start?
Okay, well, we always recommend you start with the least expensive things that give you the most bang for your buck. In other words, they're going to change the value of your property the most. Yeah. And so the simple things are removing the excess stuff, because we like to go to Stuff Mart as a human race culture, and we buy stuff. And then we don't have enough room for it, and that's a lot of times why we're buying a bigger house.
Or we have more family members and we need a little more space.
Be. I'm just being a little today.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So sometimes we have to rent a little storage room, get some of the stuff out of the house, make the closets feel roomy so that people think, because even if it's a huge closet, if it's stuffed to the gills and it's pouring out the door, the people that are looking at your house will think, oh, there isn't enough room in that closet for my stuff because their stuff doesn't fit.
Right, even if it was a big closet.
Yeah.
So the size isn't really the biggest factor. It's how much is in each of the spaces.
And if you have a modest home and you've got giant overstuffed furniture, we may need to switch that out for apartment-sized furniture, which makes your home look a lot larger.
Right. And so requiring a storage unit is not always a must. I often recommend if it's things that you're no longer using. I know we have things in our home when we moved that ought to have gone and didn't necessarily all go. Mm-hmm. And yet if you can just minimize, if there are things that you know you're not going to use again, that you've really have outlived their useful life for you, then to rid yourself of those things before you even put the house on the market, rather than when you're doing the move. So kind of do a pre-move before the move.
I just got a great idea for a company and a company name, but I'm not telling them because they'll steal my idea.
Okay. Anyway, so you want to minimize and rid yourself of those things that you don't want anymore, or you're not going to want anymore. So that may not require a storage unit, and also
the garage is not. It's nice that you could park a car in the garage, but as a secondary place to put the excess stuff, either a corner in the basement or put it in the garage. It's not a horrible thing to do.
It's really not, because in our Canadian winters, yes, we like to park inside, and yet it's probably 1 in 3 that actually do that. So people have become accustomed to garages being storage spaces.
Yes.
And it seems to not be an issue when it comes from resale. Now, if you have a beautiful workshop and you want to demonstrate the value of that, then you may not want to store in there. Mm-hmm. And what you don't want to do is store throughout the house. You don't want to put a little bit in every room and every closet. You're better to consolidate what you're not going to rid yourself of and put that in one location or 2 different locations, maybe some in the garage and some in some room in the basement, storage room ideally, not beautiful finished space.
Right. Now the other thing that's very simple is cleaning.
Right.
And sometimes our opinion of clean is different than other people's opinion of clean, and we all live in our homes at different levels. When you're actually putting your home up for sale, you really think of it, I'm not living in my home anymore, I'm marketing my home.
Right.
And so it needs to be in a condition that someone would either want to, if you went into a hotel room, you would want the bathroom clean and the sheets clean and the bed made nice, right? Otherwise, you're probably not staying in that hotel room. And it's the same thing when you're buying a house. When you come in, you want to see the kitchen clean. You want to see, you don't want to see mildew and mold on the shower around the base and whatever. So if you've got any of that kind of thing, it takes some heavy-duty cleaning and then maybe recaulking, make it sparkle.
Right. And if you're just joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate right now, you're with Ken and Yetta Dekker, and we're talking about sellers and what kind of market, when's the best time to sell, when's the time not to sell. And also we're talking, that was in the first half of the show, you'll want to go back and listen if you haven't already heard that. And then now we're talking about, and have just begun the whole conversation about, what are those things we ought to do in our home to get it ready for market, and what are the least expensive, and which ones do I get the best return on?
Yeah. So caulking.
Right.
Caulking is, I think people should have a license to use those machines because they're really tricky. And if you do a bad job of caulking, it can be worse than no caulking at all. But if you're great at caulking, you can hide cracks and trim and where it separates a little bit, shrinkage, anything like that, you can hide it really nicely. And then a coat of paint over top, and suddenly it looks fantastic.
Yeah, when we talk about hiding, Ken's not saying hiding a deficiency in the home. He's just talking about the cosmetic. So if you have any house, because a lot of it's wood and a natural product, it will shrink and expand according to the time of year. And so it looks nicer if you don't have a gap between the trim and the wall. So it's not a structural issue. If it's a structural issue, please don't hide it. Let's get the structural issue resolved and cared for, and then let's paint it and make it look cosmetically nice. So when we talk about the cosmetic maintenance and touch-ups, it's about simply
Decor.
Making it look great.
Yeah, it's about
not
decor.
about hiding anything.
No.
Right.
No. And then painting. That's another thing you should have a license for, is a paintbrush.
Yeah, I know. I don't use one at all.
No, I've been in some homes and the wall paint is splashed all over the trim, and there's roller marks on the ceiling, and it's like, oh my goodness. So if you're really good at painting, go ahead and paint it yourself. But when you're marketing your home, you want a good paint job. And you want it caulked nice, and the painter will quite often do the caulking, the prep work prior to, if you got a good painter, he's going to do all the prep work so that when he paints it, it's going to look good. There's not going to be fluff in the paint. And
having a friend help you with painting if they're good is a great idea. If you have to go and hire somebody after you've already done the painting, then that's not so ideal. From a maintenance perspective, really from a cost, you want to start on the outside of the home. You want to start with the curb appeal, and you want to trim up hedges or shrubs. You want to clean back, reclaim your driveway if the grass has overtaken your driveway, walkways, that
edge
kind
the
of thing.
walkway.
Edge the walkway. Just those things that really cost virtually nothing to do have sometimes the greatest impact.
Yeah, if your tree has shoots out of the suckers out of the bottom or out of the side of the bark, trim those off, turn it back into a tree.
Right, rather than a bush.
Yeah.
Rather than a big bush. Exactly. So you want to do those kinds of things which are absolutely only labor.
Yeah. Cut the grass.
Absolutely.
Rake it, trim it.
Get rid of the leaves if it's
nice.
fall. And in the winter, you want to make sure that when you're shoveling your snow, that you're actually shoveling the snow as wide as your walkway allows you to go, and as wide as your driveway allows you to go, so that things actually look as large as they are. Shovel off a deck in the wintertime. It's a little bit more work, and yet it will allow your home to be that much more appealing. I mean, you don't have to get out there with a scraper and scrape it down to the bare, tile or interlock, and yet you do want to expose and let people see how big it is. And then if you have seasonal photos, that's an awesome thing that we love to use in our marketing. We don't make it our primary photo on the websites because then it looks like it's been on the market for a long time. However, we do use it, especially on the Dekker Team website and in our marketing brochures and that kind of thing, as additional photos to show people what it actually looks like in other seasons.
So those are basically the least expensive, most bang for the buck.
Right, including cleaning carpets. I don't know if we specifically mentioned that, but you want to clean grout. Grout is another one that can get really dirty because even when you seal it, your grout in your tile. If you don't seal it again, sometimes the grout can actually gather a lot of dirt, and you've got different colors grout around your kitchen. So having that cleaned thoroughly, and then even sometimes you have to re-grout it because there's just been too much discoloration to be able to have it look nice. And then you want to seal it. So you just really want it to be sparkly. Sparkly is probably the best word to use when you're thinking about having your home on the market. And I certainly recognize as a realtor that whether your home sparkles or your home doesn't sparkle, you're still going to clean the house when you move in. You're still going to do your own touches. Whether the paint is beautifully done or not beautifully done, you may well choose to repaint. So a lot of times sellers will say, well, why would I do any of it then? Because they're just going to redo it anyway. And yet there is an appeal, there's an emotional response to your house that cannot happen unless it sparkles.
Yeah. You know, it's that old thing, if you're buying a car and the car there's two identical cars with the same amount of mileage on them, same color paint, but one's been freshly buffed and waxed and shiny, and any dings were taken out of it, and the carpets were steam cleaned, and a freshener was put into the car, and so it looks really, really nice and smells nice. That car is going to sell first, even with the same mileage, so same thing with a house. You're in a beauty contest.
I'm not in a beauty contest.
The house is.
You're in a beauty contest with your property. So you want to make sure that it shows as beautifully as possible. And it certainly is that one of the few things that you get to control is the condition, because you can't control the location. Once the home is where the home is, it is where it is. What the market will bear, really we don't get to determine, except you do somewhat get to determine it by the condition.
Yeah.
And then we get to determine it by the marketing and the representation that we give you.
Yeah. So the next level is a higher maintenance level. It might be your carpets are worn out. They've passed their useful time. They need to be changed for either hardwood or newer carpet. It could be your tiles are cracked and broken, ceramic tiles, if they weren't installed properly the first time. So you might want to get into that level of repair. Hardwood, sometimes it needs to be refinished or put in hardwood knobs and doors and cabinets. If they're very old and dirty and scratched, and might be a good idea to change those. Sometimes knobs on a kitchen can transform a kitchen, from an old dated type knob that has no luster to something in a nice brushed chrome, or something that bigger knobs or whatever could transform a kitchen. Handles,
not so much large knobs.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
Okay.
Handles. Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Windows is another area. If you've got rotted windows or they need maintenance is okay. Just get your window fixed. If the thermal panes are gone on them, you get that fogginess and cloudiness between the glass, have the thermal pane changed.
Right, and windows from a painting perspective, and making sure there's no mold and no mildew and no buildup on the actual window fits into the first category. Because that is windows that are not sparkly, I'm going to keep using that word, brilliant looking, then they are likely to make it seem like you need new windows, whereas all you need to do is clean them.
Yeah, and clean inside and out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, light fixtures is another thing. Light fixtures have come down in price significantly.
They have, especially if you shop around.
Yeah. And they're changing fairly rapidly in the styles that are being used. So if you've got 1970s or 1990 lighting in your house, it might be time to change some of those fixtures to modernize, to brighten up a room. Make sure you have the right amount of lighting for the size of the room.
Right. And so those are not overly expensive renovations to make, and you'll get 100% or greater return on those kinds of improvements. Now, the ones that you're going to get probably less than 50% return are your bathrooms and your kitchens and those kinds of things. And it really depends on how extreme you go with the renovation and how extreme the need is. If you have something that's already nice, then replacing it might only give you 10 cents return on the dollar.
Yep.
If you have something that is completely horrible for today's.
Hideous.
Yeah, okay. And you may even get 100% return on that.
Or more.
Or more. You can get 150% return on some kitchens.
Like, for instance, we've had houses where it has a decent countertop, but in that price range, granite is the normal. And so changing that out to granite brings us into a different price bracket and makes it a lot more saleable.
Right.
And so in that case, sometimes we recommend you spend that $5,000 to $7,000 to change that out. It makes a huge difference.
It does. It totally refaces. It gives new life to the property and to the kitchen, because kitchens, master bedrooms, and your initial response to the house, your curb appeal, is what's going to really sell probably any home.
Yeah, and then bathrooms.
And then bathrooms, yeah.
So
if you are looking for a great opportunity to make it your own, we have a wonderful property in
Embrun.
And it is listed at $285,000.
Yeah, it's a great house. It's a 4-bedroom house, big family home, room for and $285,000. We're paying that for a tiny condo or a tiny townhouse
in the city. So it's an awesome opportunity. There is a music room in the basement that is insulated or double insulated. So if you want a space where nobody can hear you and you can rock out, then this house already has that.
This is for the family with the drummer,
And the great news, when you find a home that has those extra features that are built in, you as the buyer are not actually paying for those extra features. Right? They're just bonuses. So if it suits you, what an ideal opportunity to get into the market with something that already has some of your dreams in it. And this particular property will allow you to do some updating. And make
build some sweat equity.
Yeah, build some sweat equity. It's got a large driveway, which is awesome.
Yeah, it has a single car garage, but the driveway isn't your normal city single car garage. You got one room for one more car. You've actually got room for probably 6 or 7 cars.
Which is awesome.
So that's super. And then this is the piece de resistance for this house, is it has a pathway out the backyard that leads to Tim Hortons.
Timmy's, exactly.
So if you need your coffee fix, this is the house for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate. We have enjoyed sharing with you some seller tips. And if you want specific, personalized information, the best thing to do is to reach us through our office at 613-860-4663, 613-860-4663, or info@dekkerteam.com. And one of the 4 of us realtors would love to come and see you and give you good counsel.
Yeah,
great counsel.
We'd be delighted to put together a strategy to market and sell your home and move you to the next stage, whatever that is for you.
So thanks for joining us on the Inside Track, and we'll talk to you again next time.
Bye for now.